proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the Naked City, the city of 1,000 stories. Tonight, we're going to try and squeeze in 5 or 6. We are outrage porn-free media. We will not discuss, amongst the following, your favorite color, how you feel about the latest outrage from the Department of Transportation. That's the easy stuff. We get into involved conversations, emphasis conversations with our guests, both local and domestic. And tonight is no better example of what we do here. In our first hour, joining us in just a few moments, James Yagielo. He is the co-founder of Hemp LLC. In our second hour, we've got a great young entrepreneur coming in studio to talk about her business that she's going to be setting up on Thayer Street in just a few short weeks. In the third hour, we're going to fit in everyone from Lauren Bell to Monique Chartier. We're going to talk about Democratic national politics. We're going to talk about healthcare, some of the goings-on in the halls of Congress this week, and of course, initiatives as they present themselves before the state legislature with our legislative correspondent, Monique Chartier. I'm back from a weekend off, exploring the Bananesh bunkers of dark money across the flooded plain. Yes, I was in flyover country on a secret mission designed to introduce something called liberty back here to the state of Rhode Island. I was away from the darkest depths of Mordor, aka Halitosis Hall. Somehow I managed to extricate myself temporarily from the crisis du jour mentality that continues to inhabit the halls of government here in Rhode Island. But we're back in bed, we're back with a bang. So joining me for the first time via the miracle, as we call it, Skype, is in fact James Yagielo. He is the co-founder of Hemp LLC. Hemp LLC is a nationwide staffing firm, smart like that, geared heavily towards opportunities in the medical cannabis industry. Folks, if you're not from Rhode Island, proud to say Rhode Island was amongst the first in the nation to have a medical cannabis law in state. It's been very successful and has acted as a form of treatment to tens of thousands of Rhode Islanders in the years of its existence. Last year, the coalition was intimately involved with the Libertarian Party in fighting a regressive tax on medical cannabis by our governor, Gina Raimondo. We managed to fight most of that back, and there continues to be legislative initiatives designed to grow the business, if you will, here in the state of Rhode Island. So with the eye towards legalization of recreational use, with an eye towards looking at what has become the medical cannabis program, we've decided, as always, to separate, shall we say, the fiction from the reality, to do away with the urban legend and talk to change agents in the industry themselves from around the country. It's been a recurring theme of ours here on the coalition to look at legalization not as just an issue du jour, but as an important component of, again, reestablishing true liberty here in the United States. At the coalition, we don't legislate behavior. We trust you. We believe that you have your own best interests at heart, and we believe that you're enough of an adult to make your own lifestyle decisions. So, again, without further ado, James, welcome to the coalition.
Thanks for having me.
No, this is great stuff. You know, we here in Rhode Island, I don't know if you've ever spent much time here or been here at all. We do have one of the earliest medical cannabis programs in the nation. It seems to have, in a sense, in something of a stalling action right now. There were legislative attempts made last year to increase the number of compassion centers. Ironically, my opinion, not the opinion of my guests or station management, the existing compassion centers worked as a cabal to try and make sure that they were the last ones in with opportunity. They've all hired lobbyists. But there's a continuing need for an extension in the program, both in the number of care centers as well as an expansion in the availability of quality product, which in fact will actually help to lower the price. Medical cannabis is directed at some of our physically, not spiritually, physically most frail fellow Rhode Islanders. And we want to do whatever we can to expand the movement here in the state. So tell us about your background. I understand you have a history, you have a background in staffing. What was the epiphany? What was that eureka moment when you realized that there was opportunity here in cannabis?
Well, I've been in recruiting since I got out of college in the early or late 90s rather. And in college, I also became a cannabis advocate. And I moved to Florida from up in Ohio back in the early 2000s. And finally, in 2014, the opportunity presented itself in Florida, and it looked like we were going to get a medical cannabis program in Florida. And once I started talking to potential owners and whatnot, one of their concerns was how they were going to find employees. So naturally, being from a recruiting background, I discussed it with my wife. We went in together and we co-founded Hemp Staff back in May of 2014. So it would seem like a perfect match with my recruiting background plus my advocacy for cannabis that had been going on for 20 years now.
What is the state of, and tonight, and we hope to have you on many times going forward in the future, but for tonight, we're just going to sort of lay the groundwork. What is the state of medical cannabis programs in this country? How would you rate it right now?
Right now, I would give it a solid B plus. A year ago, I would have said it was an A. Right now, people are a little tentative mostly due to Jeff Sessions' negative thoughts and words against medical cannabis. So right now, people are a little hesitant, but it's still growing phenomenally, and it was rated last year, I believe, to be the largest growing industry employment-wise.
Right. Interesting enough, I know a gentleman by the name of Bob Bridges was the former head of the Libertarian Party. Full disclosure, I am the chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party, who was a warrior in the last attempt, in the last House session in Ohio, to finally get a program pushed through. That I'll just say this, that governor who appears to be so reasonable as he ran for president, that guy Kasich, has done nothing to be of assistance to his fellow Ohioans, particularly those who find themselves in need of a pain-killing or regimen that would, in fact, act to at least partially replace the opioid deluge that constitutes the framework for our opioid epidemic. Mr. Kasich is no friend to folks who are physically challenged in Ohio. So talk about, in terms of the job opportunities that abound. This is clearly a ground floor opportunity, for lack of a better term. On one sense, you've got the pall, if you will, of the federal government, the uncertainty surrounding that. But nationwide, you've got firms that are thriving. So what type of opportunities are there for the average citizen?
Yeah, I mean, right now, the last estimate was there's about 150,000 people nationwide working in the cannabis industry.
Right.
So, I mean, it's up there comparable with like massage therapists. There's as many people working in cannabis as there are masseuses out there. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely becoming one of the, nationwide recognizable actually industries that hire people. When you think about it, you've got 30 to 50 people in each cultivation center. You got around 20 people in the extraction center, 5 to 7 in every dispensary. So those numbers add up. Like you said, Ohio is starting up a program. We estimate that's going to bring 1,000 to 1,500 jobs right off the bat. So it's definitely a very fast-growing employment opportunity. And another thing we've noticed is a lot of the wages do start near entry level. A trimmer might only get paid $10 an hour. A dispensary agent may only get $12 to $15 an hour. But after a couple years, as these new places open up, they look for someone with experience, and those people are quickly becoming managers, making $20, $25 an hour in cannabis industry.
Right, and there's as the industry grows up, there's entrepreneurial opportunities going forward as the industry expands, as more capacity is deemed necessary, particularly in light of the opioid crisis.
Absolutely. I mean, even now we're getting to the point where out west, people are starting to sell the companies they started years ago for millions and millions of dollars because high-end investors want to get into a Las Vegas market. So there's cultivators out there that started as a medicinal, now went recreational, and they're looking to sell to those large investors out there.
Well, as an aside, what do you say to states who are still on the sidelines? And tonight we're going to steer clear a little bit about the moral and perhaps the medicinal effects, but the economic impact of this. I mean, there are states still out there doing the habit. Well, I got to think about it. What do you say to them as someone who's really in the trenches, if you will, of this movement?
I mean, the tax dollars the states are getting is remarkable. if you look at the early states that went in, like Colorado, Washington, Nevada now, they're getting 10, 20, $30 million a month in tax revenue. And Colorado even at one point were so unsure on what to do with the tax revenue that they actually gave people some money back on their income tax due to cannabis. So it might only be a few dollars, but that's just the start. Also in these states, you bring up the opioid crisis. That's a big deal. We teach that in our training course. It really does help with the opioid crisis. If you really give someone something that's really high in THC, they're not thinking about doing opium, at least for a little while. So if nothing else, it's a distraction. Then the CBDs also help the receptors with the opioids, so you're not craving it as much. So we think that the more the opioid crisis goes along, the more cannabis is going to be shown that can help that, which may persuade some of the states with the money and the new crisis on hand that they may give up their more conservative ways toward cannabis.
Right, because I mean, ultimately, and this is my point has always been when there are a number of folks who get hung up on the morality of it. In your mind, is there any difference between having a bourbon in the comfort of your own home, not operating equipment, not endangering other people, but having a bourbon or partaking? Is there any moral difference?
In my opinion, there is not. And in public, I actually think alcohol can do more danger. You see a lot more people become violent and angry on alcohol than you do on cannabis. So it may even be a little less than alcohol in that aspect.
Right. And the frustration persists that because of this uncertainty at the federal level, the full both recuperative, restorative, and potentially life-saving impacts of cannabis have yet to be studied on the scale that would be appropriate. That's the saddest part of all. In order to be a slave to Mr. Sessions' rather warped priorities, there are people suffering needlessly out there. It's if there's a human tragedy involved, quite simply it's that.
And there is the research, especially with CBD and cancer. The FDA just came out and reprimanded a few cannabis companies, making claims that it helps with cancer. Now, by no means is anyone saying it cures cancer, but it does, certainly help or slow the progress of tumors that has been shown scientifically. However, the FDA can't back that up because they don't have the funds to research it to back it up.
Right. So, onto the employment opportunities. Now, let's talk about, you've got a couple of key steps, if you will, in the medical cannabis. First of all, obviously, I guess we'll break them down into the cultivation, the physical distribution, and then the caregiver dispensing act, if you will. So let's talk about cultivation. What type of economic opportunities have you found that are available in the cultivation side of the business?
Cultivation, if you stick with it for several years and you're really good at what you do and have good work ethic, we've seen people that got into the business entry level in 2012 in Colorado. And now, as recruiters that we're placing those people in states like Massachusetts or Pennsylvania, making $120,000 to $150,000 a year as the master grower of a 30,000 square foot facility.
Wow.
So these people are right. They're starting to make six figures, the ones that have been in it for 5 to 7 years.
Right. And just again, as an aside, my comment's not my guess, but as a state, we seem to be inordinately willing to spend millions to attract low cost, low salary jobs in gaming and for-profit prisons. Yet there's literally gold in them. There are hills, aren't there?
Absolutely. I mean, even your assistant growers, which usually there's at least a half a dozen in the facility like that size, are making, around $20 an hour. And then you got your site workers after that making around $15 an hour. And then your trimmers and whatnot making around $10 to $12 an hour. So you got a whole, range of different salaries, and people, move up pretty quickly in that as other people get tired and don't show the work ethic that people under them show.
Right. Now, so let's talk to the skills level necessary and how because you folks don't just place, but as my understanding is you've got training available in the form of some certifications available for these people. Am I correct?
Yes, we only train for those to work in a dispensary.
Okay.
We do have a dispensary training course. We don't train the other aspects because what we found is they tend to hire one person who has a certain way of doing it, and then that person hires under them and they train on their own specific way. So a cultivation or extraction class, it's a little hard because you can't really focus on one area or another,
Hmm.
but dispensing the medication is pretty much the same in every state across the nation.
Right. Now, with cultivation, I mean, and I guess here once again is the challenge because you have such a failure of leadership at the federal level. Much of the cultivation, and please, I mean, one of the things I love to call our show is we are urban legend busters, myth busters. I think somebody already got that name. But, you know, it's such a challenge to find legitimate information. Here at the coalition, we don't believe in fake news as because that would be sad. But so bust some myths for us. My understanding is that much of the cultivation has to be somewhat local because of the delicate nature of the product itself, as well as interstate commerce laws. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is still federally illegal to take any marijuana across state lines, even if it's from one legal state to another legal state, even if it's from one recreational state to another recreational state. Crossing the state line is still federally illegal.
Right. And as a result, one of the challenges to the legal cannabis industry, is the inability to get things like insurance for transportation. Transport companies, even credit card companies, in some cases, have been federally enjoined from doing it, and somewhat fairly high degree of coercion from a certain administration. So even in a state like Massachusetts, which would certainly not be considered a temperate farmland kind of state, there is ample opportunity for cultivation, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would say 90% of all cultivation is now done indoors in a warehouse or greenhouse setting. So you don't really, need farmland. Any given warehouse in an industrial area can be turned into an effective grow house.
Right. And what, I mean, is there, and I know this is sort of a gross simplification, but has there emerged yet a typical yield per square foot that's the ideal? Is it, or is that just all over the place, depending on the type of facilities the company doing the cultivation is able to muster?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors in that. There's the soil they have. There's the different strain. Some strains will produce, up to 8 ounces of plant. Other strains may only get 3 ounces of plant. So there's really no, standard on that. Everyone kind of has their goals based on strain and medium they use. The master grower kind of sets those goals for those that work on them.
So a master grower, for lack of a better term, is he or she sort of like a brewmaster at one of these microbreweries? Is that, with the growth component factored in as well? Is that the sort of creativity necessary in addition to the plant science?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, usually these owners, they have the money, but they don't have the cannabis knowledge. So
Right.
they hire this master grower at a 6-figure income who's been doing it for many years, and by trial and error, mostly they've learned what works and what works well. So they look at the type of facility they have, what they have to work with. They'll then suggest the correct medium, how many employees they have. But yeah, that's your brewmaster, your go-to guy is your master grower. And every cultivation facility usually only has one of those because that person, they want to have full control of everything.
Right. And truly the way to learn it from what you're telling me is to work under one of those grow masters to really get the plant science and the craft down, because this is not I wouldn't say, I mean, there's a certain amount of delicacy required in growing this. I mean, anyone who's tried to do a grow in the back of their dorm room of a certain age who might be in their late 50s, Bueller. Anyone like that can tell you this ain't tomatoes. This isn't growing squash, is it?
No, it definitely takes certain techniques, and these owners have spent millions and millions of dollars, so it's no longer acceptable to live by trial and error like it was 10 years ago in the industry. Now they got to hire that person who knows what they're doing, because one bad crop can cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. Speak to states like Florida, Rhode Island. Is there one state that's become really the epicenter of medical cannabis, and as a result, the most successful model from your perspective, where you sit?
From our perspective, actually, Illinois has become pretty much the most successful model, and you don't hear a lot about Illinois, and that's why we think it's the most successful model. It just kind of works. What they did, they implemented a very pharmaceutical type environment. It's no longer products everywhere. They actually have a tablet, and they show you the products on the tablet and all the information there, and then you can decide to look at the product going forward if you wish to purchase it. But they definitely were one of the first ones to take that pharmaceutical type model and become more like a doctor's office rather than a head shop, and they were very successful at it.
Right. Any estimate on how many people are successfully enrolled in their program right now? A ballpark?
I believe it was approaching 100,000.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
So they have a very successful. Arizona is also another very successful state you don't hear a lot about in the medical industry.
Right, right. I happen to have just got involved with a libertarian group called Safer Arizona, and again, they seem to be doing yeoman's work out there. So you've got the cultivation center, and from what you're telling us, and this is great information. You've literally got. It can be in any setting. You can be talking about a brownfield industrial building. You can be talking about a quote-unquote bucolic farm setting. You can be repurposing greenhouses. In this nation, in the both the agricultural, and floral industries, a lot of that production shifted overseas to companies like Brazil, Southern Europe, across Latin America. So, and even in places like Israel and the Middle East, where a lot of flower production, which used to be localized, and a lot of agricultural production, which is shifted out. And this is the perfect opportunity, really, to repurpose these facilities, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, they usually look for cultivation centers to be in industrial areas, but really the only stipulation by the federal government is 1,000 feet away from any schools,
Right.
churches, or daycares. So any of these abandoned warehouses that are in industrial areas could completely be repurposed to be a major cultivation center.
Right. Folks, if you're just joining us on via Skype, is James Yagielo. He's the co-founder, along with his wife, of Hempstaff LLC. They can be found at hempstaff.com. There's a link right on our Coalition Facebook page, and we'll be sharing news from them through our Twitter feed at coalition_radio as the industry grows and progresses. They've got a great website, very informative, as well as having an outstanding social media outlet. Very, very informative. And again, it's what's outstanding about their operation is not only are they providing an outlet for much needed jobs in some very challenging part of the country, but they seem to be acting as a source of information as programs evolve and grow around the country. So you've got the cultivation. Then, of course, you've got the next step, which is, of course, the certification process. And largely, in states like Massachusetts and Rhode Island, you've got operations like Cannabis and people like that who serve as sort of a medical-based facility, very much a clinical style approach to certification. What's been your experience working with them? Are you involved in placing people in those facilities, or what do you see as the growth there?
Those facilities are unique state by state. We generally don't work with them too much. We deal with more people that are actually touching the cannabis plant. Once again, we don't like to get involved with the doctors so much because the state regulations, you never really know how they're going to perceive someone who prescribes too much medical cannabis. So it's a very gray area for us. Right.
So the sweet spot for your firm is staffing in Rhode Island we call them compassion centers. Some places call them dispensaries. Again, and I guess you point out wonderfully I'll call it the patchwork quilt-like nature of cannabis laws across the country. Now, as someone who believes in the sanctity of the rights of the state, I applaud that. But do you think at a certain point the federal government should just come cocoa, as we say in New England, and fess up and understand that this is here to stay, and come across with some sort of, national guidelines from the FDA? What needs to happen?
Absolutely. I mean, first they need to stop lying to themselves or just flat out lying. I mean, it's baffling how now a recent poll said 64% of America supports recreational cannabis, yet the government won't even recognize medical studies done in the U.S. and other countries, mostly Israel lately, that have proven the medical aspects of cannabis, yet the United States refuses to recognize any of that. So until they can recognize that there is some potential and then allow the U.S. to actually research it, which has been stalemate because they did say they were going to allow it, and yet they aren't approving anyone currently. So until that happens, it's going to be a long process in America. Once they actually realize, hey, there's medicinal aspect here, then they can allow the major corporations to start to enter into the government's lobbyists, which will create the standardization of the industry.
Right. I mean, and of course, it would help if Mr. Trump or Mr. Sessions would simply do the right thing and what we call deschedule cannabis to begin with.
Yeah, and what we're going to find with lowering the schedule, you know, if you want to lower it to a Schedule 3, that's understandable, but Schedule 1's ridiculous.
Well, absolutely. So dispensaries, compassion centers, let's talk about the type of jobs that are available there and the training and the levels of certification that your firm can offer. First of all, what's an entry-level position typically entail if there's such a way to kind of make a broad brush assumption at a dispensary / compassion center?
Yeah, dispensary, compassion center, medical marijuana treatment center. Once again, every state has their own name for it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the entry-level person is going to be someone that works behind the counter and helps the patient decide what product they want.
Mm-hmm.
Because the doctor is going to recommend medical cannabis, but they don't recommend the product. Mm-hmm. So we teach the dispensary agent how to approach the customer without violating any HIPAA-type laws or anything or invading their privacy to find out what they're looking to get out of cannabis. And then once they figure out what they're looking to get out of it, they can then direct them to the correct product based on the different labeling of the cannabinoids and terpenes.
Right.
So it's very much a customer service / medical nursing type field for the entry level in a compassionate care center.
Right, and this is a critical point because of this vacuum of leadership, if you will, my words. If you were to go to a doctor and they were to prescribe you a painkiller, there would be a very specific recommendation, a very very particular dosage level. You would get all sorts of information on, let's just say, when to take it, whether to take it with food or not, to take it with liquids, time of the day. I mean, and it would all be, for lack of a better term, acclimatized to your situation, what your physical challenges you were facing. But that doesn't really exist at a high level within the medical profession, does it yet?
No, it really doesn't, because the doctors in a lot of these states are only required to take a 2 to 8 hour course to learn about cannabis. Mm-hmm. And don't teach about cannabis in medical school currently. In even states that are trying to get the pharmacology people involved, they don't teach about cannabis and pharmacology. Mm-hmm. So these people, they don't really understand it. And that's where our course starts to at least introduce these people. It's only a 4 hour course, so it's a very, entry level to it. But we teach them about the different compounds and cannabinoids and terpenes and the medical aspects of that, so that they can learn of how to read a label and decide, oh, okay, this person needs help sleeping, they need CBN in their product. This one has a high percentage of CBN, it's going to make them really tired. So we try to teach people that, and we've had many doctors and pharmacists come to us and say they learned more in our 4 hour course than they learned in all of college about cannabis.
Right, because number one, if you've got the acronyms, and we'll get into that in a second, but you've also got a variety of delivery systems. I mean, the common misconception, I'll call it the Cheech and Chong School of Medical Cannabis, is that you've got a bunch of folks sitting in a room smoking a gigantic spleef, listening to Marley or the Dead. I mean, that couldn't be farther from the truth, could it?
No, you're absolutely right there. And we cover 24 products in our class, and none of them involve smoking.
Right.
They're transdermal patches that There's different inhalers. There's even suppositories for those with prostate cancer. I mean, there's different products, and I'd say almost 50% of those products don't give you any high whatsoever, but they still help your ailment.
Right. So you've got medibles. Again, you've got an incredible diversity of delivery systems, and one of the biggest challenges that we face on the political side where I live in this argument is fighting that misconception that you're prescribing a tobacco-like delivery system that's supposed to make people better. So balderdash on that, as we say on the coalition. Now let's talk acronyms for a second, if you can, because you know the one that people are so obsessed with, which of course is THC, is by and large just one of a wide field of sub products, if you will, of medical cannabis that have this type of medicinal-like effect. So I mean, so THC, of course, for those uninformed, is the agent that gets you high, that gets you stoned. And there are situations, as you put it, in extreme pain management situations where that can be helpful. But talk about CBN and CBD, because those are really the sweet spot, if you will, of medical cannabis treatment. First of all, does CBD or CBN have any type of THC-like effects independent of itself?
CBN will make you feel a little bit psychoactive effect of, but you'll fall asleep very quickly on a CBN. We like to call it CB nighttime, because if it has high levels of CBN, you aren't going to last long after you ingest that product.
Right. Okay.
CBD actually that's like the miracle cannabinoid in cannabis. It has psycho effects whatsoever. It actually is what really started to draw the attention, because it's the only compound, including any pharmaceutical drug, that seems to help certain types of seizures, especially those that we've seen in children on different, infomercials or whatever. The CBD can definitely help Dravet syndrome and other types of seizures, and it also has many other effects, such as a relaxing, calming effect, or even it's been shown in some medical studies to slow tumor growth. Right. As well. So the CBD, if we could just study that one a lot more, that one seems to be the most medical inclined cannabinoid, and yet has no psychoactive effects whatsoever.
Right. And if you've ever found yourself in the position of having to deal with a small child who is going through a grand mal seizure through epilepsy, and you've seen the positive impact that CBD and can have in for many of these children, that's why so many of us see this as a miracle. Even petite mal seizures, I'm not sure if folks understand, and I'm not a medical professional, and as I always say, I'm not an expert. I just try to play one on the radio. But any of those seizures can have a stroke-like effects on the neurological system of the child. So by reducing the volume and size and severity of those seizures, you have two positive effects. Number one, from just a behavioral and a lifestyle, you're exponentially improving the lifestyle of that child. Number two, you're helping to prevent this buildup of long-term damage to the neurological system of the child. So it's that's probably what, Mr. Yagielo, that's probably what's so damn frustrating if you're a political activist like myself and just see through the forest for the trees. It's just so damn frustrating. So these folks, folks who are working at the front counters, I mean, folks will walk in, they'll have their cannabis card. This is the important thing. I mean, in all of these facilities, you require legal documentation. The cases of people just getting a card so they can score some extra weed, quite frankly, are anecdotal in nature and diminishing all the time. Of course, legalization would take care of that right away. But so the folks at the dispensary, these folks who are working at the counter, they are literally the front lines of the industry, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, what we teach in our class is the cannabis industry kind of depends on the dispensary agent. If a lot of these people who have never dealt with marijuana before, especially some seniors or whatever, they may get a recommendation for their illness because their doctor truly believes it's a medication. and they go in there skeptical. If they go in and they feel like they're being treated by Cheech or Chong instead of a medical professional, they're going to come out there with a little bit of skepticism. Now, if you give them the wrong product and it totally doesn't work, then they're going to think the whole thing is nothing but a farce and it was all a scam, which is not the case. If you have a knowledgeable bud tender, you can almost certainly help relieve their ailments, whatever they may be.
Right, and that's the important part, because you're dealing with a large segment of your population are folks who are older, who never in their wildest nightmares, if you will, would have ever considered themselves recreational users of any drug whatsoever, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, and that is the fastest growing demographic attending dispensaries in the last year is your 65 and over. Because what's happening, we found, is a lot of their children are finding, hey, you have this ailment, go try cannabis. They're like, I don't want to try cannabis. They're like, Mom, Dad, it will really help. Just go try it. And a lot of the children are actually pushing their older parents to go try it for the first time.
Right, and for many of these people, it's the first time they've had any physical interaction with cannabis in their entire lives. So there's a high degree of skepticism that has to be overcome. So the type of person doing this is, they've got to be willing to absorb a lot of technical information. At the same time, there's got to be what's the term in science fiction? They have to be empaths. They have to be compassionate and empathetic at the same time to a population that's physically challenged and, quite frankly, on pins and needles about the whole damn process. And of course, again, you'll hear me point throughout our conversation, if our federal government would start, growing up a little bit, you could alleviate a lot of those concerns. Here in Rhode Island, for any folks in our libertarian social media network, we were fortunate enough recently, an attorney from the American Civil Liberties Union actually won a landmark case in the state against employment discrimination for a tested medical cannabis patient who was using a legal card, was using a CBD-based product, not interfering with their work time, if you will, not interfering with their job. High-level employee who was let go because they tested positive. And fortunately, the courts here in Rhode Island found that was wrong, and those folks were offered relief as a result of the court system. So we do have some good news to report here in Rhode Island. So you've got your frontline worker. How many hours does your class go, and where can folks participate in this class? Because you're gradually becoming a nationwide organization. I've just noticed from your Twitter feed how often y'all are traveling. But what's the layout? How can folks take this class?
Yeah, we travel around the country. We do classes 2 or 3 times a month. If you go to our website, hempstaff.com, and click on the training tab, you'll see where our upcoming cities are and where we'll be. Our classes are done on Saturdays, so most people that have jobs can attend. We also do 2 times to make it easier. We have a class at 8 a.m. and then a class at 1:30 p.m. at the same location. Right. We actually were just in Danvers, Massachusetts last week. We don't have the next class posted yet, but in the next couple of weeks, you'll see another class coming up for Springfield, Massachusetts, and then we'll probably be back in Danvers as well in spring 2018 or so.
Right, and let me stress, and again, this is my interpretation, even if you're not interested in pursuing a career, if you're a caregiver, and that's one of the designations Rhode Island has, it's a caregiver, very often it's a family member who is taking responsibility for co-managing the delivery process for a patient. Anyone can take this class if they want to become more conversant with the technology, with the product, all of that, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. We have many people that take our course that either want to use medical cannabis for themselves or have, like you said, a caregiver, a family member that they want to administer it to. But they may not know what all those different cannabinoids like CBN mean and stuff. So they come to our class, and now when they go to a dispensary, they can look at the label and kind of know what they will need or their family member will need based on the different cannabinoid percentages or even the terpene percentages.
Right. So, it's just an outstanding opportunity particularly if, for example, if you're my age and you're in your 50s, you do have older family members for whom this may be a highly appropriate regimen, and may, I can't understate this. They may dramatically impact the quality of their life through a pain treatment regimen that is non-addictive. And that's a critical word, isn't it? It's non-addictive. And that can be adjusted for circumstances. It's criminal that you can go to Dr. Feelgood and seemingly get opioids at will, and yet you have to go through this whole extra legal process to participate in this program. It's just, to me, that's the criminality. James, you get the feeling that 10 years, 20 years from now, we'll look back on this period and what do the kids say? WTF?
Right. And we equate this to like the internet, when the internet was just starting and people were a little skeptical of computers. Should I put my credit card online? And now no one thinks twice about entering, their credit card at Amazon.com and placing it over.
Right.
So
Now,
we're kind of same infancy phases of that.
Now, are you going? Do you have any plans to come to Rhode Island anytime soon?
Not currently. We're hoping maybe they expand some medical compassionate care centers, or even go the recreational route. But we tend to hesitate to go to a place where there's not too many job openings. We don't want to hold a class and then not have anyone be able to get employment.
All right, which brings up we're going to get into the next couple levels. That brings up a critical point. So your timing is perfect. How do people, once they've taken your class, and they see this now as a career opportunity, how do they then make the next step to get involved? Do you have organizations coming to you looking for employees? What's the next step after they've successfully completed one of your classes?
The last 20 minutes of our course or whatever, we give them a resume that is kind of geared towards the cannabis industry, so that a lot of these people, some haven't had a resume, some have a resume for another industry. We kind of show them what a cannabis industry resume should look like to really highlight the areas people will be interested in dispensary. And we also go over who's licensed in that state or that area, and if they have websites where these people are posting their jobs. We do, as recruiters, get some companies that come to us for employment, but they rarely come to us for entry-level employment when they're just starting out. They're kind of in a money crunch at that, and they kind of hire their own employees, and a lot of them have actually found a shortcut by just looking for those with our training on their resume to call an interview. So while we don't get too many direct contacts for those, if we do, we send out our students first, of course. Just putting our training on their resume generally helps their cause in getting an interview.
Right. Now, what are the next levels up? What you let's just say you've enjoyed a couple of years and paying your dues, and I know that's a foreign concept to some people, but like any industry, you have to pay your dues. You have to learn the product. You have to display a track record for being able to work with the patient and being able to understand the technology. What's the next level up typically once you get past that, literally working on the front lines?
Yeah, the next level is then usually they have a team lead. Some states call it an agent in charge, and that's kind of your manager of the bud tender or dispensary agents, if you will. That person, usually starts to get between $15 and $20 an hour, and then after that, you've got your actual person who's managing the dispensary and taking care of the finances, dealing with the regulators, dealing with the law enforcement or whoever might come in. And that person, is usually making around $40,000 to $60,000 if they're just managing one dispensary. On top of that, you have people that manage several dispensaries, kind of like a general manager. And people that are doing that out in Colorado or Nevada or other places that have been doing it for many years are now making $60,000 to $80,000 a year.
Wow! And what type of training and/or placement services are you offering yet to folks at that level?
Yeah, we offer entry-level dispensary training. We are a recruiting company, so we hire we hire for clients anyone that they're looking for that has experience in the industry. It's kind of where our specialty lies and what most people are looking for right now. Like I said, they hire entry level on their own, but the managerial, the master growers, the extractors, the dispensary managers. They come to us and they say, hey, we need someone with a few years experience in the industry. So then we go out there and we find these people with a few years experience in the industry, and in the newer states if they're willing to relocate to that new state.
To become a master grower, do you need an agricultural background, a formal training, or do you find most of the folks at that level, at least at this point in history, to be largely self-taught?
Yeah, most are self-taught. We have had some clients that did want a horticulture degree along with experience, but most figure if they have 5 to 7 years of vetted experience in the cannabis industry in another state, they know enough. A lot of times they're looking for a horticulture degree, they'll take 3 to 5 years experience instead.
Right. So, but do you see and it's interesting because this is a double-edged sword. On one level, you've got folks who have a love for a horticultural or agricultural background, and there are certainly some great schools, for example, here in New England. The Stockbridge School comes to mind, which is an extension, I believe, of the University of Massachusetts. Do you feel like that's the way the industry is going? And I hate to use this word, but as the industry becomes quote unquote more legitimate, not in our eyes, but in the eyes of conventional industry, is a degree going to be important down the road? And as importantly, for folks who are pursuing that type of degree, does that become then a valid source of employment?
I think it becomes more of a valid source of employment to get into the industry now.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them, people with the horticulture degree out of college are applying for those assistant grower jobs.
Right.
So because they have a horticulture degree, they're getting, that entry level job over other people, which then they get the training they need from the master grower. And in 3-5 years, they then have that horticulture degree and the training from the master grower, which people are seeking. So there's the horticulture for that, and actually we found in extraction people prefer botany degrees.
Wow. Okay. So the extraction job is the industry, as the industry matures, you're really starting to fine tune the agricultural process. The extraction job, how would you describe that? What are their daily responsibilities?
Yeah, right now, the last stats I saw, only about 40% of medical marijuana sales are bud or flower, if you will. Everything else is an edible, an oil, a topical, a different type of product. And the only way to make those products is to extract the chemicals, the cannabinoids and terpenes from cannabis. So these extractors will usually use very elaborate machines and take the cannabis and extract whatever they're looking for out of that cannabis, whether it be into an oil or a specific cannabinoid.
Right, right. So just like compounding pharmacies, these are organizations that are developing highly customized products, particularly based on the customer's needs. Is that a good way to describe it?
Exactly. Like we say, each of these cannabinoids and terpenes have different medical aspects. So there are a lot of times in these products, they're trying to focus on one to help that person with that specific medical ailment.
Wow. So in summary, you're looking at an industry that is by and large maybe 10 to 12 years old, yet exhibits all the demands of a much more mature, multi-level industry where you've got a variety of technical needs based very much on the localized nature of the business. And as a result, the employment opportunities are clearly, we're no longer talking about, potential. We're no longer talking about philosophical. We're not only talking about, projected. There's a demand right now, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Going back to my internet.com kind of era, that right now we are in the infancy stages, and those who get into business now will have those 3 to 5 years experience when other states like Texas and Oklahoma and Florida are really up and going and start to go recreational, which everyone thinks is the path most states will go in the next 10 years.
Right. And when some of those states finally hit it, no one's gonna. Rhode Island will you'll see a little ripple one day when you walk by. You'll feel a little wind, and that's Rhode Island. But when some of these monster states like Texas
Right.
finally embrace the lifestyle, the technology, the pharmacy, and the science behind it, the growth then won't even be just exponential. It will be as our former president used to say, nuclear. I love that word. Then, what's the old line? Katie barred the door. The time is now. Particularly smaller states, Rhode Island, need to embrace this now so that they can be prepared for when it goes completely mainstream. Because at that point, the internet. I hadn't thought of that analogy, but that's an outstanding one, because the folks who were, if you can meet someone who is employee number 50 at Google, you're probably meeting them at a very expensive restaurant, or you're probably meeting them at a very exclusive resort, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. First in,
yeah.
First in gets the riches.
Right. You're not meeting them at White Castle. That's for damn sure. Well, that's just outstanding. I hope you'll join us on an ongoing basis to kind of keep us apprised of what's going on. I hope at some point we can convince you to do something more, even in southern Massachusetts. Rhode Island's a tiny, tiny little state. If for no other reason than we get a chance to meet and go for a coffee or an adult beverage. Because, again, what you've done tonight and what will live on our YouTube page and we'll be sharing with folks around the country is kind of puncture some pretty grotesque myths, give truth to power, and give people an understanding of exactly what the opportunities are. So I really appreciate your participation tonight. Again, how can give us the full range? Where can they find you on the web, on Facebook, on Twitter? Give folks a snapshot of how they can find out more about what y'all do.
Sure, you can look us up at our website, www.hempstaff.com. You can give us a call during normal Monday through Friday business hours. Our number is 855-MMJ-JOBS if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Facebook, we're at Facebook. Just look up Hemp Staff. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+. We're on all of them.
Great stuff. Well, again, James Yagielo, he is one of the co-founders of Hemp Staff LLC. Again, hempstaff.com is, I think, your starting point where to go to. More courses coming up in the spring up in northern Massachusetts. We're going to do our best to get him to come down here in person, even if it's just for something quick when he travels northeast again. But the big takeaway is this. As we pointed out, and for folks who were thinking about attending last week's highly successful medical cannabis convention here in Rhode Island, for folks who find themselves either in the position of being physically challenged themselves, who find themselves trying to assist a beloved family member, for someone who may be a political activist or political in nature and who wants a better understanding of the truth, the science, the medicine underneath this really revolution. We're going to try to provide you as many resources as possible, and this is clearly one of them. Check out their website. We'll be posting this interview on our YouTube page, which of course is referred to on the main heading at coalitionradio.us. And just, let's all grow up together. Let's address this issue as adults, and let's just create a better lifestyle for ourselves. And let's heal the sick. And let's not let politics or prejudices or ignorance stand in the way of that, because there are very few things that I'll call tragedy, but that happening on an ongoing basis is truly one of them. So James Yagielo, thank you again for joining us, and we'll sure to be back in touch soon.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'll be back.
All right, folks, we're going to take a very quick break right now. Hopefully joining us in a couple of minutes will be Lauren Nadell of your Rhode Island Progressive Democrats, as well as a variety of insurrectionist type organizations. She's going to give us a quick update on what's going on in the DNC. But you are, in fact, at this very moment in time, at this very moment in history, listening to the Coalition on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, broadcasting live here at the Go Local Live Broadcasting Center in the heart of the city we love. The website's coalitionradio.us, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Of course, our apolitical, all crony capitalist, anti-billionaire baseball boys club Twitter feed at Pawtucket is Home. You can find all of this and more. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.